Breaking all around us. The Packers have been busy upgrading their defense. First reported by NFL Network, the Packers agreed to a deal with edge rusher Darius Smith. He led the Ravens last season with 8.5 sacks. So they add him, and they weren't done yet. NFL Network also first reporting that they have added former Bears safety Adrian Amos. Dan Graziano mentioned him earlier. He will sign with Green Bay. He started 56 of 60 games since being drafted by the Bears in 2015. Finished last year with 2 picks and 73 tackles for Chicago. So the Packers have been busy this morning upgrading their defense. And, of course, as the moves continue to come, we will have the very latest up to the second. Brings us back to Hembo, and I have Jalen and Orlovsky guessing. Le'Veon Bell is the all-time leader in scrimmage yards per game.
Do this.
Who is second all-time? Is it Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, or Jim Brown? Guys, go.
I'm going with Jim Brown. I'm going with C, Jim Brown. That is my guess.
Jim Brown is the legend. Walter Payton played
You're too emotional. You're too emotional.
I'm very emotional when it comes to Barry Sanders.
Well, you're half right between you, and it's Jim Brown is the correct answer.
Yeah!
All these years later, Jim Brown, 125.5 yards, 3.5 fewer than Le'Veon Bell. Well done, Dan Orlovsky. And for more on all of this, let's bring Louis Riddick into the conversation, who can take us through all of this free agency stuff from a front office perspective. Good morning, Lou. And I want to start with Le'Veon Bell. He doesn't have a deal yet, and we've been kicking around this morning what that means after he sits out all of last season and has been waiting for this for such a long time. What should we read into the fact that it's taking him a lot longer to get a deal done than a lot of these other players?
Yeah, I think as time moves on here, Greeny, you start to get a feeling, you start to get the sense, and as you talk to people around the league, that you wonder if Le'Veon's really going to be that guy who actually tops the market, who goes above $14 million per year for running backs, the guy who sets the standard as far as average per year and guaranteed money for running backs. My sense is maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe he's one of those guys who comes in maybe even below what the franchise tag would be in terms of average per year. Maybe it's in the $13 million range. And it's not exactly what he thought it was going to be. Look, the fact of the matter is this. He poses some risk to football teams in terms of injury and long-term durability, and then decision-making off the field, having been suspended before. And these are real things that some teams will have a problem with, and some teams will try to use as a bargaining chip in their favor to suppress what you want as far as an average per year and guaranteed money. On top of the fact that teams have been very successful getting value in the draft as far as young running backs with less tread on their tires. This will be an interesting one to see how it pans out. It only takes one team. We all know that. But as every day and every minute ticks by, you start to get the sense that maybe this contract doesn't come in where maybe he thought and where others thought it might. But we'll see.
And you've lived this sort of on that side of it from inside the building. The longer it goes, who does that favor? Does that favor Le'Veon's side, or does it favor, if you will, disfavor his side the longer this thing stretches out?
Yeah, I think it favors the team for sure because, look, the first 24 to 48 hours of true free agency, which now is the quote-unquote legal tampering period, is where contracts kind of explode and you wind up seeing the market get reset and people kind of get all up in arms about, wow, why are they paying these guys like the way they're paying them? This is ridiculous, although people need to keep in mind the salary cap is expanding and exploding too. So they have to pay the money, so it has to go to someone. So when you know that, and that is the situation, a guy like Le'Veon Bell, look, it's set up for you to go ahead and cash in right now. The fact that he hasn't made an announcement, nobody has said anything about where he's going to go, the more that goes on, the more that doesn't bode very well for him, in my estimation, and it bodes very well for the teams.
All right, let me go through some of the other deals yesterday, or in fact, let me have you do it. What is one thing you saw yesterday, player-wise, team-wise, or otherwise, that you really liked?
Well, I really like the Tyrann Mathieu signing in Kansas City because of what he does for them from a coverage perspective at the safety position, and I think this is what they coveted the most. Look, Tyrann really is a 5-position player. Think about this. He could play corner. He can play the nickel position. He can play the dime position, which is basically just the weak side that's the opposite side of where the nickel would play. He can play free safety and he can play strong safety. He's 26 years old. He is someone who was greatly respected both in Arizona and in Houston in particular. J.J. Watt, was effusive in his praise for Tyrann Mathieu and his work ethic and leadership. And he's 20, and like I said, he's 26 years old. So they really love those things relative to what they need in their defense. Now, I know he comes with some risk too, having had some significant ACL injuries, but they think all the positives really outweigh the negatives. So I really like what they got from an on-the-field perspective and from a locker room perspective by signing Tyrann.
And how about the other side? We talked a lot about him earlier this morning. Everyone at the table agreed. How about the other side? Was there one yesterday that made you scratch your head?
Oh, it doesn't make me scratch my head, but I'll say this about Nick Foles. It comes with a lot of expectations, Greeny. There's no question about that. They are basically saying that Nick can be a franchise guy, not just during the postseason, but during an entire 16-game season and postseason, and give them everything that Blake Bortles did not. Look, over the past 2 years, Blake Bortles has thrown the fourth most number of interceptions in the NFL, and he's a guy who averaged under 7 yards per attempt. They need Nick to be the 2017 postseason Nick Foles, which was 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, over 9 yards per attempt. They need that guy. They need that guy when the situation arises. They need him to play like that. The defense needs to play better. He needs to protect the football. But given what they gave him in terms of average per year and guaranteed money, that's the one I think that will be scrutinized the most, because just 2 years ago, and even in the early part of this season, Jacksonville was considered a Super Bowl favorite for the AFC in terms of representing the AFC. So Nick almost has the same kind of pressure on him this year that you saw Kirk Cousins have to live with in 2018, given his contract that he was given by the Vikings.
It's great perspective. Lewis, thank you so much. We always appreciate it. We'll see you again tomorrow as this thing continues to develop. Let me take it to the table here with the Dans, Orlovsky, and Graziano. You brought that up with Foles as well earlier, and I want to pick it up where Lewis just said this. Look, this time last year, we were talking about Jacksonville being a very feasible AFC representative in the Super Bowl if they just got average quarterback play. Nick Foles should be able to give them that, if not more. Why are they not that?
Well, let's talk about what Nick Foles is going to bring, the positive aspect. He leads the NFL last years in getting the ball out of his hands, so that will help that bad offensive line. The reality, though, is this is not a very well-built roster. Tom Coughlin, for the great things that he did in New York, it's not a very good roster right now. So you've got an offensive line that struggles, absolutely. So what do? Find a quarterback that's certainly going to get the ball out of his hands quickly. That is something, again, that Nick Foles excels in. But I've talked about it. They've got an unreliable running back. They have one guy on their football team with 100 catches in the NFL. One, Marquise Lee, and he's coming off a devastating knee injury. They've got some issues on the defensive end. This defense is not what it was 2 years ago. Don't forget, that year that they did go to the AFC title game, they led the NFL in turnovers. They forced like 44 turnovers, some outrageous number like that. And so you can't rely on those all the time. This roster is not as good as people wanted to think it is.
I hear you. I don't know if you saw the number that Hembo popped up on the screen, though. The last 2 years, if their quarterback plays well, they win. They haven't lost a game in which the quarterback has played well. What reaction did you hear around the league yesterday when the money came in on Nick Foles?
That it was higher than expected because the Jaguars really were the only spot for him, so they were kind of bidding against themselves. But they definitely need a starter. They definitely need a guy there that can be in command of the huddle, that can get the ball out quickly, knows the offensive coordinator, John DeFilippo, with whom he worked in Philadelphia a couple of years ago. So, yeah, the dominant defense is the reason that good quarterback play equals wins for that team. The defense is going to have to continue to be as dominant as it was 2 years ago.
And they've lost some pieces, too. They lost Deshaun Gibson. They lost Malik Jackson. So it's not going to be the same. The leadership will be huge for them. Nick Foles will bring outstanding leadership.
Yes, maybe that defense won't be rolling their eyes at the offense every time they walk out onto the field next year. That might help a lot. We'll take a short timeout. Much more football still to come. The antics of Antonio Brown caused the Steelers to sell low. Is it possible the Giants are about to do the same thing? That's next. Get up, ESPN.